From the CISO series, it's Cybersecurity Headlines.
Ransomware backup providers are paying ransom to ransomware attackers. TikTok wants your face and your voice prints. And the FBI wants to talk to you if you have read USA Today. Now, these are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have been bringing to you on this week's Cybersecurity Headlines, and now we're going to get a chance for some insight, some opinion, and some expertise on these stories and more from our guest, who this week is Robert Wood, who is CISO at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Wish I had that kind of welcome when I walk into the living room. So,
well, we have a highly trained studio audience, but they're available to be rented out. So, welcome to the show. Our sponsor for this week is Trend Micro. I'll be speaking about them shortly as well. And for people who are joining us, join us on Crowdcast, because there you can actually share some of your comments. And if we have the time, we will indeed address those as well. So we have 20 minutes to come through some of the stories that we've been covering on the daily podcast, Cybersecurity Headlines. The first one that I want to bring up here is Exogrid. Exogrid is a company that provides backup technology in preparation for these kinds of things, and they themselves were hit with ransomware. They paid this back on May 13th. The problem with this was, as they were negotiating and dealing with this, they actually lost the decryption key and had to ask for it back. And I'm not intending by any means to make fun of them for doing that, of course. But this was, once again, a high-stress situation where a lot of data, personal data of clients, commercial contracts, NDA forms, financial data, was all left out there. So they were negotiating this down, and they had some problems getting back up. So I would like to ask you, Robert, can we discuss this panic factor? As we're talking about the physical preparation for breaches and vulnerabilities, we've got this human element of dealing with a crisis from a panic side point, the emotional side point. Is this something that you have encountered or prepared for in your own particular area of expertise?
Yeah, I think it's pretty prevalent in when you're trying to respond to a high profile, high stress incident. And there's this inherent it's like an unspoken metric that speed of recovery is super, super important. And it's sort of it stands to reason that if you're moving really, really fast and you're scrambling to try to do something, that you might make mistakes. And if you make a mistake in such a situation, it could be, the impact of that mistake might be much larger than if you're just doing, your day-to-day job. And, I love this, this saying that's used a lot in the military, that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And, if you're going sort of slowly and methodically and intentionally, but making sure that everything is right, and if the process is smoothly carried out, that ultimately it's going to be done more quickly, as opposed to scrambling to get it done really fast, potentially making mistakes, and then having to double back and clean up those mistakes. So, I think it's like, this is a thing.
And that's an excellent expression. I think it's a kind of a leadership point that people should really pay close attention to, because I think also there's a notion of drilling and preparing for these using muscle memory. And that's what struck me about this story. I mean, these people are working really hard, and mistakes can get made. And of course, that's what reverberates around. And we're thinking about the protection of the brand as well. So yeah, I feel for them, but it's a really good lesson, I believe, people to take advantage of just what other people have experienced to justify perhaps the cost and the time involved in preparing and planning for these kinds of things. So moving on to another story we have here, which is about TikTok, and they are quietly updating their privacy policy to collect users' biometric data. This is data such as face prints and voice prints from the content that users post on the platform. They're couching this in being for other things like demographic classification and ad customization and so on. But basically, unless your country or state has pre-existing laws preventing against this, your agreement to the terms of service puts you in line to have this collected. So this, to me, sounds like a hacker's delight. What's your take on? We're using this for free as usual. So what's your take on giving away your face and your voice?
I mean, isn't this always the case with the we're giving away all of this data for for our benefit, so to speak. For ad personalization and make our lives easier, et cetera, et
Hmm.
cetera. And the you pay the piper much farther on down the road. So I mean, this to me sounds is almost just bananas. And but it's also not super surprising. And what I find one of the things I find most surprising about this is that a year or two ago there's this huge push around consumer data privacy laws, GDPR and CCPA, and there's this big frenzy of activity, and organizations were kind of reorganizing themselves to clean up their privacy policies and be more transparent, have more mechanisms to be good stewards of user data. And at the same time, some organizations just sort of fly in the face of that, and we kind of have just moved past it seems in some ways moved past the initial spark of a reaction to those big consumer data privacy laws, which is really unfortunate, because this stuff is I could see this being quasi disastrous down the road.
Spark of reaction. Absolutely. These things are so exciting to be part of, whether it's TikTok or anything else. So it's, indeed, we are giving away a lot in exchange for this kind of fun. So we have the story of the month basically being Colonial Pipeline and the ransom there, and the notion that basically the U.S. recovered a lot of the money that was apparently paid. This was not the entire amount, and the full announcement is supposed to come out on Monday, but it does appear that they got the ransom back in large amount. And that was because they were able to track down the path, basically, of the money trail, even though it was a cryptocurrency wallet trail. The interesting thing about this is that they said that basically you can't really count on this happening every single time the same way. It depends entirely on the context and the situation of the actual ransomware people themselves. But it does still appear to be an interesting development. How do you think this might force ransomware pirates to step up their extortion game even further, knowing that maybe governments, not just the US government, but governments maybe have a stronger track on what they're doing?
I think the most interesting thing to me about this is that it changes the calculus, like the economic calculus for criminal organization who orients towards using ransomware as their method to extract financial gain of some sort. So it I think it was almost largely considered a given that you were going to get some kind of traction, or you had extremely high confidence that you were going to extract a ransom, especially if you went after a high profile target. But now, knowing that, you may not get paid up in the first place, and even if you do get paid, you could, that could end up, getting recovered, and if it gets recovered, you're also very likely, you're very close to law enforcement at that point, and
Hmm.
as somebody who's operating on the wrong side of the law is probably not a very comfortable situation. So I think security being this big game of economics, this to me is really exciting and really interesting, and bravo to the Department of Justice on this one.
It certainly should give them a little bit pause for thought that, maybe they're not quite as invincible as they seem when it comes to hiding everything inside crypto, that there are some smart people on the good guys' side too. So it definitely is intriguing, but I think also I'm always looking at the constant tradition of innovation that they have to see what comes next. But while we're speaking about economics, I want to just talk about the sort of the story of the last couple of days, which was the outage at Fastly. Fastly is a content delivery network, of course, but some of the names that went down, even temporarily: Stack Overflow, Twitch, Reddit, CNN, Amazon, Shopify, the BBC, even they went down for a while. Their browsers, or your browser, could not pull the page together. It wasn't such a long outage, but my question to you is that Fastly has described this as a global CDN disruption. Okay, fair enough. But what does this say about the bottlenecks on the system? I mean, the internet was supposed to be a centerless web, and we're now seeing, of course, these providers, which they do great service. There's no question about it. But it does appear that this, once again, may be an Achilles heel that could be exploited. So, what does this say to you about the potential for bottlenecks, not just only at Fastly, of course, but just as part of being on the internet?
So in a couple of weeks ago, there's this executive order that came out in orienting around cybersecurity, and a big part of that had to do with supply chain risk management. And this to me speaks directly to a supply chain issue. So when we, for example, look at a particular provider, you're not just looking at the provider, you're looking at what's behind the provider. So, for example, when Amazon Web Services or Azure, one of the big infrastructure as a service providers have an issue, they have a regional issue or something, there's this huge cascading effect, and nobody really thinks about it because the uptime is so good. But when it's bad, or when they have a blip, it's really disruptive. And you can stop work for an entire day. And if you have mission critical systems that are reliant and don't have a failover, that it's this whole thing. So to me, it's it encourages us to think beyond the initial provider. Whether it's somebody hosting your source code, somebody doing your security scanning, somebody serving you news, or whatever it happens to be. To look beyond them and figure out where there's bottlenecks or choke points in terms of shared dependencies. So are they all sort of bundled on an organization like Fastly? Again, great organization, or Amazon Web Services, great organization, but nobody is impervious to error or just crazy issues happening. It's not anybody's necessarily fault that things happen.
No, it's a good lesson in contingency planning. These are great companies, but I think we learn these as we go along. But having Plan B or an alternate Plan A may be a good thing. Maybe they do have it. I mean, the story will come out, of course, but I think it's something we all need to learn as we go. So, our sponsor for this week is Trend Micro. If you want to discover new ways to simplify and strengthen your security, well, join Trend Micro Perspectives on June 16th, where industry experts and practitioners are going to share deep insights and real-world examples on how security can play a pivotal role in accelerating your digital transformation. There'll be speakers from Gartner, Forrester, ESG, AWS, and Microsoft, and you can join by simply visiting trendmicro.com/perspectives to register. I highly recommend it. So we are back. The phishing problem continues. This is something that I ask guests every week, and do so in my professional practice also, in terms of understanding the human nature behind why phishing always catches people. A new report from Phish Labs has identified that there's 47% uptick in phishing sites in Q1 of this year as compared to last year at this time. The trend is continuing year over year, with the phishing traps now happening in social media messaging apps. That's the first time it has topped the list. And also, the single sign-on approaches too are heavily targeted. This is accounting now, single sign-on, for 40% of overall phishing volume. So this seems to be a constant problem. The human weakness becomes the primary weakness of security online. So do you see, or have you seen anything that could be a potential solution to slow down this problem, Robert?
So I mean, there's a lot of solutions to phishing and social engineering, in my opinion. None of them are perfect. I think a big part of this, I don't love the phrasing of human weakness or humans being at fault in a lot of cases, because I think humans, we sort of adapt to these sort of systems and processes and technologies that we're used to using. It's like I have lots of conversations with people at my place of work about this, where people might be getting hundreds, 200, 1,000 emails a day, and and the advice of, make sure you're reviewing every single email and look at
Yeah.
all the links and make sure that it's coming from the right place. And even if you were to add 30 extra seconds of critical thinking to every email, they'd be spending a week just looking at their email and never do anything else. And so I think there's a there's there's more responsibility that needs to be put on platforms that are being used for potential abuse, or organizations that are designing business processes or offering systems that are allowing phishing attacks to come through as easily, and to allow people to make mistakes as easily as they do. And I think we need to be thinking in a more human-centered design approach, such that it is harder to make a mistake. It is harder to have these things be presented to you in the first place, and just effectively try to take the sort of the decision burden off the end user, whether they're in an organization or they're just John Q. Public consumer, because there is a decision fatigue that happens, and
Yes. Yeah.
we like to say security is everyone's responsibility, but not everyone is hired with security in their job title. Not everyone's performance on security. Security isn't really everyone's job, even though we all do have a part to play. And so we, as security professionals across the industry, need to be making things easier for both users in our organization, and users in the broader sense, if you're working in some kind of consumer oriented business model.
I wonder if this is a job for AI in terms of assessing the actual construction of the text and the verbiage to make things easier. Let's hold that thought, because the last story is related to that as well. But before we get there, just related, I think, and also in terms of working in an emergency, there was a survey that came out from a mobile safety organization, Rave Mobile Survey, talking about how many workers still don't know emergency procedures. This is a workplace safety and preparedness survey, which again can focus on all kinds of things, not just simply cyber, of course. But the fact is that only 28% of traveling and remote workers are involved with safety drills. So once again, this need perhaps for proactive safety drills, cyber attacks, yes, but also things like active shooter, workplace violence. There just seems to be that a lot of people aren't yet being sufficiently tested, prepared for this in the age groups that would deal, let's say, with, again, messaging technologies or something that appeals directly to them. So we touched on this before, but do you think that we're now, as we're looking into the new normal, people working in the hybrid situation at home but also in the office, we should really place heavier emphasis on physical muscle memory training for emergencies?
I think there is definitely an element of that. I totally agree. I think we also need to, almost similar to the previous story, we need to be making things easier for end users. So, for example, I just wrapped up finishing this book, which I'll plug here. It's the Ministry of Common Sense, and there was a great example that I'm just going to totally plagiarize and give credit to in it, that referred to fire exit signs. So typically they're placed, above doors in these big bright red letters, and as it started to analyze this particular example, if a fire happens and somebody's actually trying to find an exit, smoke is going to rise. It's going to be
Yes.
harder to see those signs, and people are going to fall to their bellies and be crawling around trying to find things. And so the last thing they're going to see is the fire exit sign above a door. And so I was analyzing this as a sort of typical procedure that's just been sort of assumed as common sense. And so we do fire drills and we look for the exit signs and all of that. And so there's an element of common sense or muscle memory, in the sense that if you do it enough, you'll kind of know your way around a building. But if you're a guest in the building, you may have no idea if a fire happens. And so I think there's a balance there in finding and designing procedures such that they're easy to follow, and they're more of a natural they're more of a natural reaction if things do go awry. which
It's
of
one of
course,
the
I mean,
things.
that's not easy to do, but
It's not, and it's one of the things that I teach people a lot. I mean, when we go back to traveling in hotels once again, the two things I teach people about staying in a hotel is number one, to count the number of doorway entrances between your room and the stairwell. You know, how many actual physical doorway entrances. And secondly, yeah, book hotels where they have those exit signs on the floor. A lot of them in Europe do for that very reason. If you're crawling in a
yeah,
smoke-filled hallway, the sign should be down there on the ground with you. Now, we are
right.
very quickly running out of time. I'm having such fun with you here, and it's such great commentary. I just want to get a real fast comment on our last story, which is about this is coming up in tomorrow's newscast. Google fixing sixth Chrome zero-day exploited in the wild this year, which makes me nostalgic for concepts like Patch Tuesday. It seems that there are more and more fixes that have to be done out of band by Google and Microsoft and others more regularly. So do you think this, again, is another trend that we're going to be much more focused on patches on a daily or hourly basis going forward?
I think so. I think patching cycles and the historical sort of like monthly cadence where you receive a patch, test a patch, deploy a patch, monitor, and then rinse and repeat. I think a lot of security security process is going to have to become much more fluid
Hmm.
because things are changing so rapidly, especially with browser patches or other software patches. These things are just happen asynchronously. They're not waiting for some big drop on a patch Tuesday or on a specific date or time of month. It's just when they need to happen, they happen, and you just have to be ready to respond. So
Yeah.
organizations have to kind of they've got to adapt and be more flexible.
This risk window is getting smaller and smaller. Well,
Totally.
Robert, this has been amazing, fantastic. I'm just curious to know, was there any particular one of our stories here today that was a favorite for you, either as an eye roller or a thumbs up? What stood out for you tonight?
I think I would give two thumbs up to the ransomware recovery for Colonial. I think that's a really fascinating development in the whole spectrum of ransomware resiliency and recovery efforts for organizations. And
Hmm.
I just want to say, two thumbs up and applause to my peers over in the DOJ, and yeah, stay safe out there.
Yeah, I think they're calling you. So fantastic. I will ask my guest what they would like to have as their sort of call to action. But I would like to basically introduce it myself. You have the coolest LinkedIn ID I have ever seen. So, I mean,
Thank
you
you.
have Holy Cyber Batman at LinkedIn is where you can reach Robert. I think that is absolutely amazing. So, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been so enlightening, and I really appreciate your wisdom and your insight. So, thanks for being with us on the show today.
You are very welcome. This was fun.
Great. Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, we are coming to the end once again of another great show, or at least I think it was. I just love learning things from our experts, especially when Batman is actually hanging around in the background. To learn more, join us tomorrow. Our video chat tomorrow is Hacking Acceptable Risk, an hour of critical thinking on when we should stop trying to reduce risk, which is a very appropriate and timely commentary based on what we've just been learning. And remember also, you can reach us. You can listen to us every weekday. Our 6-minute podcast, Cybersecurity Headlines, will give you the information that you need to know to get into your day and know what's important and what's going on out there. So I will be back next week. I thank you very much for joining us. Stay safe. Take care. See you soon.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.